Hi everyone, and welcome to Exploring the Build. If you just found this place, then welcome, and if you're returning, I'm glad to have you back. I'm Alex, and this is my channel where we explore and theory craft different character builds for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. Today, we are continuing our Gloomhaven series of character builds, where we try to take the character classes from the hit board game Gloomhaven and recreate them in Dungeons & Dragons. We are doing a locked character class again today as we approach the end of the Gloomhaven character classes, and we are creating the 3 Spears class. If you don't want any spoilers for this class in particular, then feel free to watch the video at a later time. I won't take any offense. But if you are okay with spoilers, or you already know what this class is and want to see how they would play out in Dungeons & Dragons, then feel free to come along for the journey. I'll pause now for a brief moment, but this will be our last and final spoiler warning for the video. Okay, let's get started. Today, we are making the 3 Spears class, which is also known as the Quartermaster. The Quartermaster is a thematically very cool class. They are literally the shopkeep NPC who has decided to take up adventuring. In D&D, we are definitely going to want to play into this theme and try to run our own shop in our downtime, or at least have some bonuses that will help us make some items that we could then perhaps sell later on. Mechanically though, the Quartermaster is a jack of all trades. They've got a high hit point pool, they can wear heavy armor, they have access to high damage and mobility, and they have some interesting support abilities that usually will revolve around items. They can basically do it all and fill whatever role the party needs at any given time. We're definitely going to want to find some way to become a jack of all trades character when looking at how to recreate them in Dungeons & Dragons. Before we jump into the actual full build though, let's look at their flavor text. The Valrath Quartermaster. Valraths make excellent merchants because of their uncanny business acumen. They are able to quickly take stock of their wares and make snap decisions about how much each item is worth. It is not uncommon, then, for an army or city garrison to employ a Valrath as a quartermaster. Skilled quartermasters have also been known to strike off on their own, aiding smaller adventuring parties in maximizing the effectiveness of their equipment. After all, what is a warrior without a good sword at their side? Starting at character creation with our lineage, we are a Valrath, which in D&D is going to be considered a tiefling. Just like our sun character was, we're using tiefling because that demonkin species already exists in D&D, and while custom lineage could work, it feels a little bit more appropriate to use a lineage that is already supported. Admittedly though, we're not picking up any tiefling specific feats or anything that is very supported by the tiefling lineage, so you don't have to use it if you really don't want to. For our stats, we are actually going to change the base +2 and +1 that a tiefling normally gives us, and we're also not picking a special tiefling lineage, so we're just going to use the optional rules from Tasha's College of Everything to pick our own +2 and +1 that we can assign anywhere. We're then going to assign our +2 into Strength and our +1 into Constitution. After point buy, we should have the following stats: 16 Strength, 8 Dexterity, 16 Constitution, 14 Intelligence, 8 Wisdom, and 12 Charisma. We want an okay Intelligence and Charisma to be able to actually sell our items eventually, and you can feel free to swap any stats around, but for the sake of our build, we'll go with these. For our background, there are 2 that work absolutely perfectly. Number 1 would be Soldier, because as a soldier, we could choose to have been a Quartermaster for an army somewhere, and that would just fit absolutely perfectly. The other option would be Guild Merchant. Because the Quartermaster in Gloomhaven is technically, yes, a Quartermaster for the Town Guard, but they also run their own shop in the lore a little bit as well, that would imply that we might want to be more of an independent merchant, and Guild Merchant works perfectly for that. Guild Merchant, of course, is a variant of the Guild Artisan background that would also be pretty fitting, admittedly. Pick your own favorite background though, no matter what, as long as it works thematically, that's what we're looking for. Starting off the actual level breakdown of our build now. At level 1, we are a fighter. And as a fighter, we're going to get Second Wind and a fighting style. Second Wind is a bonus action self-heal that gives us a d10 plus our fighter level, and that scales pretty nicely. And then for our fighting style, we're going to take Defense because it's the most generalist of all the various fighting types that are available. If you have a favorite fighting style, feel free to pick that, but for the purpose of this build, we're going with Defense. On level 2, we are Fighter 2, and we gain Action Surge here. We can now have additional action on one crucial turn, whether that's an attack, a dash, whatever you want. At level 3, we are Fighter 3, and here we gain our Fighter subclass. We're going to go with Eldritch Knight because it lets us do something kind of interesting, and I like to call this a switch build. Though really, it can be called whatever you want since there's no actual title associated with it, and I didn't even come up with the build myself. I saw a video by the channel D&D Daily. I'll put a link to their video in the description below, but it was really interesting and gave me a little inspiration for this build in particular, along with a couple others. Essentially, the idea is that we can use the Eldritch Knight's weapon bond to be able to switch weapons really efficiently in combat. Because usually you only get one free interact with an object action on your turn, most players, when playing D&D, will probably drop one weapon they're holding if they need to pull out another one, and that works fine. But if you didn't want to drop weapons and you want to just smoothly transition back and forth between different styles of combat, well, then the Eldritch Knight works very well. As the video of D&D Daily had pointed out, it's a bonus action that we can use to conjure a bonded weapon to our hands. We could have two primary bonded weapons, perhaps a ranged and a melee weapon. We could then pull out one of those two weapons at the start of combat, and when we need to switch later on, use our free interact with an object action to stow that weapon, use our bonus action to conjure the other weapon to our hand as an Eldritch Knight, and then still have our actual action to attack with. That allows us a lot of versatility in combat, and for our Quartermaster, who is trying to be a generalist and to switch up between ranged attacks or just different types of melee weapons like hammers, axes, and spears, then technically we can do that too. I'll let you decide what you make your bonded weapons. We could admittedly use our cantrips as an Eldritch Knight for our ranged option, and then just have two melee weapons, maybe one with reach and one with a really big damage die. At level 4, we are a Fighter 4, and here we gain our first ability score improvement or feat. We're just going to take the ability score improvement for right now, so we can just increase our strength to 18, and we'll probably call it capped there for the rest of this build. Admittedly, later on we could actually cap it, but there are a few other things I'd like to get instead. At level 5, we are Fighter 5, and we now have extra attack. Extra attack now lets us swing twice, so even after we switch between our various weapons with our Eldritch Bond, we'll still have 2 attacks to use with the new weapon that we pulled out instead of just 1. At level 6, we are now going to jump over to Artificer. Our intelligence is good enough to allow us to multi-class, and it's time that we actually picked up what gives us the qualities of a Quartermaster, which is the ability to make or enhance items. First off, as an Artificer, we're going to gain some more spell casting, and we're also going to gain some magical tinkering. The magical tinkering is more of a ribbon feature, though hopefully it will work thematically for us to be able to make some little small tinkering inventions that we can then sell for a small profit. And our spellcasting just gives us more utility in terms of options. We could pick up some healing spells like Cure Wounds that Artificers get, or we could pick up some control spells, maybe a few damage type spells, whatever we really need to round off our Jack-of-all-trades Quartermaster playstyle. On level 7, we are an Artificer 2, and here we gain Infused Item. We now learn 4 infusions, and we can actually make 2 infused items. You can be selfish with these if you want to, and just make some items that you would really like, or you could also be the Quartermaster and create some items that you're then going to hand off to your party members. It doesn't really matter too much. I'm not really building for us to be selfish with the infusions, so I'm not going to account for them in our build. I'm going to assume that we're going to be the Quartermaster who wants to give items to other players, since that is a support option that the Quartermaster has, but you can do whatever you'd like with it. At level 8, we are an Artificer 3, and here we are going to gain our Artificer subclass. I'm going to take Armorer here. Armorer actually allows us to have our Arcane Armor as well as the Armor Models feature. The Arcane Armor isn't too important since we have a fairly good strength and proficiency with heavy armor already anyways, but the Armor Models are pretty important. Over the course of a rest, doesn't matter if it's short or long, we can create Arcane Armor that has a specific model in mind. It can either be the Guardian, or it can be the Infiltrator. The Guardian is meant to be more of a front line sort of tanky armor build, and we'll get some good use out of that at some point, whereas the Infiltrator is meant to be more ranged, utility, and stealth oriented. For the purpose of how this fits into our build, let's look at what our playstyle is now. Over the course of a short or long rest, we're going to pick whichever armor model is best to use for the upcoming rest of the session. If we know we're going to be in combat, we'll probably use the Guardian. If we know we're going to be trying to sneak in somewhere, we'll probably use the Infiltrator. When we're in the Guardian form, we have Thunder Gauntlets that deal a d8 of thunder damage when we hit an enemy, and that enemy has disadvantage on attack rolls against creatures other than us until the start of our next turn. That's really awesome, though we do admittedly have some other weapons that we could use, but I'll get to that in a minute. The other feature is that a number of times equal to our proficiency bonus, we can use a bonus action to give ourselves temporary HP, which, like I always say in Gloomhaven videos, the temporary HP bonus is just essentially Gloomhaven shield, because that's basically just damage reduction. The Infiltrator armor, on the other hand, gives us a bit of a speed boost. It allows us to be stealthier by removing the disadvantage on stealth checks for heavy armor, and it has a lightning launcher, which is just a unique ranged weapon attack that deals lightning damage. And once on each of our turns, when we hit a creature with it, we can deal a little bit extra lightning damage on top of the normal damage that that weapon does. Now that we have a built-in ranged attack for our Infiltrator suit, and a built-in melee attack for our Guardian suit, we're going to want our weapon bonds to make up for what those weapons don't do. If we're in Guardian form, we want at least one weapon bond to probably be a ranged weapon of some kind, or we're going to want our cantrips to be our ranged options, and then have two melee weapons that just deal a lot of damage or have reach, since our Thunder Gauntlets deal an okay amount of damage but are meant more for tanking. Then in combat, we can walk up, and if we want to play more defensive, we use our Thunder Gauntlets. If we want to just go all out for damage, we pull out a big hammer, axe, sword, whatever. If we need a little bit more reach, we pull out a pike, halberd, or glaive, and just go swing away at the enemy. If we're being stealthy, on the other hand, our weapon bonds could just be melee weapons. And then, not only would we have our lightning launcher for most range encounters, but as soon as enemies get close to us, or if we want to get close to an enemy, we can then just pull out any melee weapon of our choice and go to town on the enemy. At level 9, we are an Artificer 4, and that gives us another ability score improvement or feat. Here, I'm going to just increase our ability scores again by giving our intelligence a +2 boost. At level 10, we're going to jump back to Fighter for Fighter 6 and pick up yet another ability score improvement / feat. And here, we're just doing the exact same thing we did last level. We're increasing our intelligence now to 18 and just calling it capped. At level 11, we're a Fighter 7, and here we gain the War Magic Eldritch Knight feature. Now, whenever we use our action to cast a cantrip, we can make an attack with a weapon we have as a bonus action. Technically, that's a little situational. However, what we could do is, if we're out of range at the start of our turn, we could shoot a ranged cantrip at an enemy, move up, and if we make it to them, then use our bonus action to attack that enemy. And of course, we could have a reach weapon if we need a little bit more reach. Or, if maybe you have a hand crossbow, you could use a cantrip as your main action, and then use your hand crossbow as your bonus action. The one other thing that we can also definitely do is the old Booming Blade weapon attack combo. The cantrip Booming Blade, which is probably one we wanted to have picked up right away when we became an Eldritch Knight. If not, we could always get it now. That cantrip just allows us to make an attack, then if we hit, causes thunder to whirl around the enemy, and if they move, they will take extra thunder damage. So it's a good incentive to make an enemy stay put. It can also combo with our Thunder Gauntlets, so if we ever need to really try and make an enemy stay toe-to-toe with us, we can use our Thunder Gauntlets plus Booming Blade in the same turn. Just having the ability to use a cantrip and an attack on the same turn opens up a lot of awesome options for us. At level 12, we're now a Fighter 8, and we gain yet another ability score improvement or feat. And here we're taking a feat. For us, I'm saying that we're taking the feat Martial Adept. Martial Adept gives us 2 Battle Master maneuvers of our choice, and 1 superiority die, which is a d6, to use those maneuvers with. The reason we want this is because of the Quartermaster's AoE or multi-target melee abilities specifically. We have a lot of versatility and generalist options in terms of, do we want to be ranged, do we want to just hit really hard, do we want to be defensive, or do we want to have a little bit of reach? What we don't have are a lot of crowd control options, besides maybe some spells. So for those, I think the solution would be to take some Battle Master maneuvers that are going to give us access to things like Sweeping Attack, which is kind of like a cleave. Not a very good one, admittedly, but still better than nothing. Or we could also pick up something like Lunging Attack or Brace to be able to hit an enemy that's a bit further away or an enemy that enters our reach. Any other maneuvers are pretty good to pick up as well if you wanted to choose those, but those are the main three I'm going to focus on, since those kind of mimic the various AoE techniques that the Quartermaster actually has access to in Gloomhaven. Level 13, we're now on Artificer 5, and that gives us extra attack from our Armorer Artificer. We can now attack twice when we attack with our Armorer weapons, though technically we could already do that because we had generic extra attack. Level 14, we are an Artificer 6, and here we gain tool expertise. We are now an expert in every single tool you could possibly imagine. It's not too important, but it's nice to have, and thematically will help in our downtime when we're either fixing or making new items. At level 15, we are an Artificer 7, and that's going to give us Flash of Genius. Flash of Genius is an amazing feature where we can, as a reaction, give a bonus to either ourselves or our allies that is equal to our intelligence modifier. It's not perfect at +5, but that is a +4 bonus. The bonus only applies when they are doing an ability check or a saving throw, but that can still be very, very crucial depending on what is happening in the situation. We do also have to be within 30 feet of our ally if we're choosing to use it on them. However, assuming we're using it on a skill check, that should probably always happen, I would hope. And if we're in combat and we're using it on a saving throw, then it would definitely help to be near them at that point in time. At level 16, we are an Artificer 8, and here we gain another ASI/feat, and this is actually our last one. We're going to take the feat Fighting Initiate. Fighting Initiate gives us a fighting style of our choice, and that can legitimately be any fighting style of your choice if you have a favorite weapon you're using in combat more than other weapons. But since we want a Jack-of-all-trades Quartermaster, we're going to actually want to pick up Superior Technique. Superior Technique gives us access to another Battlemaster maneuver and another Battlemaster superiority die, meaning that we now have 2 superiority die that constantly come back on short rests and 3 maneuvers to choose from. I'm again going to assume that we went with sweeping attack, lunging attack, and probably brace, but you could pick any other maneuvers that you would like that will give us more options in combat. Level 17, we're an Artificer 9, and here we gain armor mods from our Armorer subclass. Armor mods is an interesting feature that works with our infused items. First of all, our actual suit of arcane armor now counts as different pieces of armor for the purposes of infusing. We have gauntlets, we have a helmet, we have a chest piece, and we have boots. Before, it technically all counted as one solid item, but now it's separate. The other thing that we get is 2 extra infused items that we can have at a time. That brings our total to now 5 infused items that we'll ever be able to have out of 6 infusions that we know. That's pretty good. The caveat is that the 2 bonus ones we get from armor mods have to actually go to our armor. This is where we can now be selfish as a Quartermaster. Because we get the 2 extra infusions and they have to go to us, I'll say that those 2 infusions are going to be ones that we are definitely going to want. I'll still leave it up to you as to what those infusions are, as it could be anything that really boost our generalist playstyle. Level 18, we're now a Fighter 9, and here we're going to gain Indomitable. Indomitable is an okay feature for fighters usually, given that it just lets us re-roll a failed saving throw. However, because we're a little less specialized than your average fighter, and because we have Flash of Genius, this can actually be really powerful, because not only can we just re-roll the failed saving throw, but we can also add Flash of Genius to the new roll if we want. Level 19, we're a Fighter 10, and at Fighter 10 we gain the Eldritch Strike ability from Eldritch Knight. Eldritch Strike says that when we hit an enemy with a weapon attack, that enemy has disadvantage on the next save they make against the spell we cast. That's really a good combination if we're looking to actually cast some control spells that we got from Artificer, but otherwise it's not going to come in handy too often. Finally, at level 20, we gain the fighter's extra attack ×2, meaning we can now attack 3 times on our turn. Alright, time to summarize what we have. We're the Quartermaster, and we are certainly a jack of all trades. Artificer alone gives us a lot of utility, a lot of healing, and the Armorer subclass has given us the ability to either be a frontline tank or a stealthy ranged / utility backline character. That alone is awesome. But then with the switch build type of idea that Eldritch Knight provides, we have a lot of versatility in combat as well, being able to switch between a big melee weapon, or maybe a melee weapon and potentially a shield. And then ranged weapons, or at least other types of melee weapons. One interesting thing that isn't necessarily a regret, but is an observation, is that if we had built for it, we could probably have tried to pick up the Crusher, Piercer, and Slasher feats. Those feats each specialize into specific damage types, and when we're able to access a variety of weapons as a martial character, especially with our Eldritch Knight weapon bond, we could make really good use of those feats. A couple other things to note that I didn't really touch on are our multi-classing for how our spell slots end up working out, as well as creating spell scrolls. The Quartermaster has a lot of spell scrolls as actual cards and those abilities. And technically in downtime, pretty much anyone can create a spell scroll. We might not be the best at it, someone like a scribe wizard might be better than us, but we'll certainly be good enough to be able to do it, and then either hog those spell scrolls for ourselves, or hand them out to our fellow party members. For our multi-classing of spell slots, this is where it gets kind of interesting. As an Eldritch Knight, we have to take 1/3 of our normal level to determine what level of caster we count as. Because we only made it to 11 and not 12, that means we count as a 3rd level caster for the purposes of our Eldritch Knight levels. For Artificer, however, they are a half caster, but they're a half caster plus. They actually round up when they divide their level by 2 rather than rounding down, meaning that because we only got to 9th level Artificer, we divide that by half, which is 4.5, and then because they're an Artificer and they have special rules, they round up to 5, meaning that in total, we count as an 8th level spellcaster. It would have been kind of nice to be a little bit higher and feel like an actual full half caster and get up to 5th level spell slots, but just getting to 4th level spell slots is perfectly fine, given that neither of our spellcasting class are actually going to have access to 4th level spells, meaning that we have lots of potential to upcast some spells that we do have. Overall, we're a very unique support character because just like other Gloomhaven characters that have used the Artificer class, we're all about supporting our team more through our items rather than just our healing or straight bonuses. We also can shift and switch to any role that is needed in combat, whether that's tanking, damage dealing, you name it. There aren't too many other real regrets that I have for this character build, since really, the Quartermaster is just all about being a generalist. It would have been nice if we had been able to have a few more charisma features to be able to really set up shop and sell items a little bit easier, but we'll work with what we got. Other than that, let me know what you thought of the build or what you would do to change to get closer to the idea of the Gloomhaven character class of the Quartermaster. Thank you so much for coming on the journey with me, and I hope to see you in the next one.